Colorado Territory, 1871. The scent of pine carried on the mountain breeze as Owen Faulkner stood at the edge of the untamed land he'd just purchased, hat in hand, heart pounding with possibility. 20 acres of promise nestled in the shadow of the Rockies, just 3 miles from the growing settlement of Silver Creek. At 24, he was younger than most men staking their claim in the West, but the years spent driving cattle had hardened his resolve and toughened his hands while leaving his spirit untamed. "What do you think of it, Pa?" Owen asked, running his fingers through his sun-bleached brown hair. His lean frame cast a long shadow in the late afternoon light. Jacob Faulkner, weathered by decades of hard living, surveyed the land with practiced eyes. "It ain't much to look at now, but the soil's good. Water nearby? You could make something of it." Owen nodded, blue eyes fixed on the distant mountains. "I'm thinking cattle at first, then maybe horses later on." What Owen didn't say was that this land represented more than livestock and crops. It was the foundation for dreams he'd scarcely allowed himself to acknowledge. Dreams that had taken root the moment he'd first laid eyes on Amelia Rose at the county social 6 months ago. "You sure about settling down so young?" his father asked, as if reading his thoughts. Owen smiled, the light stubble on his jaw catching the sunlight. "Never been more sure of anything." Amelia Rose sat perfectly still on the porch swing of her family's modest home at the edge of Silver Creek. At 20 years old, she had mastered the art of listening, truly listening, to the world around her. The creak of the swing chains, the chirp of sparrows in the nearby cottonwood, the soft footfalls of someone approaching. Her world had been dark for 3 years now, since the fever that took her sight but spared her life. "Miss Rose," Owen's voice came warm and gentle like the midday sun. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." A smile bloomed on Amelia's face, transforming her delicate features. Her chestnut hair was neatly braided and coiled at the nape of her neck, her calico dress simple but well fitted to her slender frame. "Mr. Faulkner, I've been wondering when you might visit again." Her fingers found the edge of her shawl, smoothing it nervously. "I've been away," he explained, climbing the steps, "finalizing the purchase of some land." "You've bought land here?" Amelia's face brightened with surprise. "I thought you were just passing through with the cattle drive." Owen settled beside her on the swing, careful to leave a proper distance between them. "I was. But sometimes a man finds a reason to put down roots." The unspoken implication hung in the air between them. In the months since they'd met, Owen had made a point to visit whenever he was in town, reading to her from books he borrowed from the small-town library, describing landscapes they passed on their carefully chaperoned walks, telling stories of his travels that made her laugh until her sides ached. "Your mother inside?" he asked, his voice dropping slightly. "She's visiting Mrs. Peterson. My sister Rebecca is here, though." Amelia tilted her head toward the open window, where the sound of a young woman humming could be heard. Owen took a deep breath. "Miss Rose, Amelia, I was wondering if I might call on you. Properly, I mean. With your father's permission." The swing stopped its gentle motion as Amelia went still. "Owen Faulkner, are you asking to court me?" "I am." His voice was steady despite his racing heart. "I know I don't have much to offer yet. The land's undeveloped, and it'll be hard work for years. But I'm determined to build something worthwhile." Amelia's hand reached out, finding his forearm with unerring accuracy. "My father will want to know your intentions. Then I'll tell him honestly." Owen's voice lowered. "I intend to marry you, Amelia Rose. Not today or tomorrow, but when I've built a home worthy of you." The sound of a throat clearing made them both start. Rebecca Rose stood in the doorway, eyebrows raised. "Father's just coming up the road," she announced, a knowing smile playing at her lips. "Perfect timing, wouldn't you say?" Owen stood quickly, straightening his vest. Perfect timing indeed. As Rebecca disappeared inside, Amelia whispered, "He's strict but fair, and he worries about me more since." "Since your illness?" Owen supplied gently. "Yes." Her sightless eyes, a striking hazel that still held flecks of gold in the sunlight, seemed to look through him. "He fears no man will want the burden of a blind wife." Owen knelt beside her, his voice fierce with conviction. "You are not a burden, Amelia Rose. You're a blessing I never thought to find out here." The sound of boots on the pathway announced Thomas Rose's arrival. Owen stood, hat in hand, shoulders straight, ready to face the man whose permission he needed to court the woman he was already halfway to loving. What Owen couldn't know was that Thomas Rose had already been watching the young cowboy for months, noting his respectful manner, his steady work ethic, and most importantly, the way his daughter's face lit up at the mere mention of his name. Winter, 1871. The courtship of Owen Faulkner and Amelia Rose became the talk of Silver Creek. Twice weekly, Owen would arrive at the Rose household, often bearing small gifts, a ribbon for Amelia's hair, a jar of honey from a traveling merchant, or most precious of all, new books he would read aloud by the fire while her fingers worked delicate lacework. On this particular evening, snow fell in gentle flurries outside the window as Owen described his progress on the homestead. "The cabin has 4 rooms now," he explained, watching as Amelia's fingers expertly navigated her needlework. "Kitchen, sitting room, and 2 bedrooms. It's simple but solid." "It sounds wonderful," Amelia said, her face turned toward the crackling fire. "Will you have animals by spring?" "A few head of cattle to start. 2 horses. And I've been thinking about a garden." Amelia's fingers paused in their work. "A garden? What would you grow?" Owen leaned forward, his voice dropping as if sharing a secret. "I was hoping you might help me decide that." "Me?" Amelia laughed softly. "What do I know about gardens? You know what smells sweet. What feels interesting to touch. What sounds pleasant when the wind blows through it." Owen's gaze was intent on her face, watching the play of emotions. I thought it might be something you'd enjoy, if you were to visit." Or, Amelia prompted, her heart quickening. Owen glanced toward the kitchen where Mrs. Rose was deliberately making more noise than necessary with the dishes, her way of reminding the young couple they weren't truly alone. "Or if someday you live there," he finished quietly. Amelia's cheeks flushed pink. They had been courting for months now, but neither had spoken so directly of a future together. "I would like that very much," she whispered. Owen reached for her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "Your father has given me permission to ask for your hand, Amelia." "Not yet. He wants me to prove the homestead is established first. But by summer, if you're willing." The sound of something shattering in the kitchen broke the moment. Mrs. Rose appeared in the doorway, her face flushed with embarrassment. "Just a plate," she explained. "Nothing to fret over." "Owen, would you care for more coffee before you head home? The snow's picking up." As Mrs. Rose bustled back to the kitchen, Owen and Amelia shared a private smile. Their conversation would have to wait, but a promise had been made, a future glimpsed. What neither knew was that outside the window, a figure had been watching. Stanley Mercer, son of the town's wealthiest merchant and a man who believed his status entitled him to whatever, and whomever, he desired, pulled his coat tighter against the cold as he scowled at the scene of domestic contentment. "A blind girl and a penniless cowboy," he muttered, turning away. "We'll see how long that lasts." Spring arrived in a riot of wildflowers and new grass. Owen worked from sunrise to sunset, clearing land, mending fences, and building corrals. Every Sunday, he would clean up, don his best shirt, and drive into town to escort Amelia to church, then spend the afternoon with her family. On this particular Sunday, he arrived with a small wooden box tucked under his arm. "What have you brought?" Amelia asked as they sat on the porch, Rebecca dutifully sewing nearby as chaperone. Owen placed the box in her hands. "Open it." Amelia's fingers traced the edges, finding the small latch. Inside, nestled in cotton, were a dozen small cloth bags, each tied with string. "What are these?" she asked, lifting one to her nose. "Seeds," Owen explained. "For our garden. Each bag has something different: lavender, roses, daisies, sunflowers, herbs. I thought we could plant it together." Amelia's face lit up as she explored the bags, smelling each one. Owen had already treated with a drop of oil to give her a hint of its future scent. "This is wonderful, Owen. But I don't know the first thing about planting a garden." "Neither do I," he admitted with a laugh. "But Mrs. Patterson at the general store gave me a book. We can learn together." Rebecca cleared her throat. "Father would remind you that there's no together yet, officially." Owen nodded respectfully. "Of course, I'm getting ahead of myself." But as Amelia's fingers lingered on a bag of rose seeds, her smile told him she was every bit as eager for their future to begin. What none of them noticed was Stanley Mercer riding past, his eyes narrowing at the scene of domestic bliss. Stanley had spent the winter expanding his father's business interests, but he'd returned to Silver Creek with one particular goal in mind: securing a wife who would elevate his standing even further. And despite, or perhaps because of, her disability, Amelia Rose had caught his eye. Her father was respected throughout the county for his fairness as a judge. An alliance with the Rose family would open doors even Mercer money couldn't buy. The fact that Amelia was strikingly beautiful despite her blindness was merely a pleasant bonus. The fact that she seemed besotted with a nobody cowboy was a problem Stanley intended to solve. 2 weeks later, Owen arrived at the Rose household to find an expensive carriage outside and Thomas Rose looking grave. "Mr. Faulkner," he said formally, "we weren't expecting you today." Owen removed his hat, confusion evident on his face. "Sir, I always call on Thursdays. Amelia and I were planning to." "Amelia has another caller," Thomas interrupted, his expression unreadable. "Stanley Mercer has requested permission to court her." Owen felt as if he'd been kicked by a horse. "But sir, you gave me permission to." "I gave you permission to court her, yes. But I never promised exclusivity." Thomas sighed, looking suddenly older. "Mercer can provide for her in ways you may never be able to. Security, comfort, medical care if her condition worsens." "And what about love?" Owen challenged, his voice low but intense. "Does he love her?" "He claims to admire her greatly." "That's not the same thing." Thomas studied the young man before him. "No, it's not. But a father must consider all aspects of his daughter's future, especially one with challenges." From inside the house came the sound of laughter. Amelia's musical tones mingled with deeper male laughter that set Owen's teeth on edge. "Does she know I was coming today?" he asked. Thomas had the grace to look uncomfortable. Mercer arrived unexpectedly with his proposition. "I thought it best to hear him out." "And what does Amelia say to this arrangement?" "She knows her duty to consider all suitable offers." Owen clenched his jaw. "With respect, sir, I'd like to hear that from her." Thomas Rose hesitated, then nodded, stepping aside to allow Owen entry. "Very well." In the sitting room, Amelia sat stiffly in her usual chair while Stanley Mercer lounged nearby, expensively dressed and radiating confidence. When Owen entered, Amelia's head turned sharply toward the sound of his footsteps. "Owen," she called, uncertainty in her voice. "It's me," he confirmed, noting how her tense posture immediately relaxed. Stanley rose slowly, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Faulkner, didn't expect to see you today." "Clearly," Owen replied evenly, before turning his attention to Amelia. "I came as we planned, to discuss the garden designs." Amelia's face flushed with confusion. "I told Father we had plans. I didn't realize." Stanley stepped forward smoothly. "Miss Rose and I were just discussing my recent trip to Denver. I've brought her a gift, imported French perfume. Perhaps you'd like to continue your gardening discussions another time?" The condescension in his tone was unmistakable. Owen looked to Amelia, whose face had clouded with distress. "That's for Amelia to decide," Owen said quietly. All eyes turned to the young woman, whose hands were clasped tightly in her lap. The tension in the room was palpable as she took a deep breath. "Mr. Mercer, you've been very kind, but Owen and I had a prior engagement that I intend to keep." Her voice was soft but determined. "Perhaps you could call another day?" Stanley's confident expression faltered for just a moment before he recovered. "Of course. I wouldn't dream of imposing." He took Amelia's hand, bowing over it though she couldn't see the gesture. "Until next time, Miss Rose." As Stanley departed with barely concealed irritation, Thomas Rose excused himself to see him out, leaving Owen and Amelia momentarily alone. "I didn't know he was coming," Amelia said immediately, reaching for Owen's hand. "Father just announced I had a visitor, and suddenly Mr. Mercer was here with gifts and proposals." Owen took her hand, squeezing gently. "Proposals? Not of marriage, not yet. But his intentions are clear." Amelia's unseeing eyes seemed to search for his face. "Father thinks I should consider him." "And what do you think?" Owen asked, his heart in his throat. Amelia's answer was interrupted by Thomas Rose's return. The older man surveyed the young couple with a mixture of concern and resignation. "Mr. Faulkner, I believe you had plans to discuss gardening?" he prompted. Owen nodded, releasing Amelia's hand. "Yes, sir. I've been drawing up plans for a sensory garden at my homestead. Plants chosen specifically for their textures, scents, and sounds." Something in Thomas Rose's expression softened. "That's quite thoughtful." "It's wonderful," Amelia added quickly. Owen has been researching plants that would thrive here and provide interest through touch and smell since I can't see them. Thomas studied Owen with new consideration. I see. Well, don't let me interrupt your planning. Rebecca will join you shortly as chaperone. As Thomas left them, Owen leaned closer to Amelia. You never answered my question, he whispered. What do you think about Mercer's interest? Amelia's hand found his again, her fingers intertwining with his. I think, she said softly, that some men see a blind woman as easy to control, and others see her as someone to protect and cherish. Her grip tightened. I know which kind of man I want, Owen Faulkner. The relief that flooded through Owen was tempered by the knowledge that Stanley Mercer was not a man accustomed to losing. The battle for Amelia's hand had just begun, and Owen's only advantages were a heart full of love and a half-built garden. He prayed it would be enough. Summer arrived in waves of heat that shimmered above the prairie. Owen's homestead was taking shape, the cabin completed, a small herd of cattle grazing nearby, and most precious to him, the beginnings of a garden unlike any other in the territory. He worked on it in the evenings after his other chores, carefully laying out paths wide enough for someone to walk safely, building raised beds at different heights, selecting plants not just for appearance, but for sensory experience. Tonight, he sat on his porch, sketching additions to the garden by lantern light. Tomorrow, Amelia would visit for the first time, chaperoned by her family. It would be her first time at his homestead, and Owen was determined everything would be perfect. A sound in the darkness made him look up. A rider approached, silhouetted against the moonlit prairie. Evening, called a familiar voice as Stanley Mercer rode into the yard, his expensive horse a stark contrast to Owen's more modest mount. Owen set aside his sketches, instantly wary. Mercer, you're a long way from town. Stanley dismounted gracefully, dusting off his immaculate riding clothes. Thought I'd see this famous homestead for myself. Judge Rose speaks of it often when comparing his daughter's suitors. The implication was clear. The judge was measuring them against each other. Owen stood, his posture stiff. Well, now you've seen it. It's late, and I've got an early start tomorrow. Stanley smiled thinly, ignoring the dismissal. His eyes drifted to the fenced area near the house where newly planted seedlings were just beginning to emerge. Is that the famous garden I've heard about? Seems a lot of effort for someone who can't see it. That's because you don't understand Amelia, Owen replied evenly. She experiences the world differently, not less fully. Stanley's smile vanished. Let's dispense with pretenses, Faulkner. You and I both know Judge Rose wants what's best for his daughter. A blind woman needs security, comfort, servants to assist her. Can you provide that on a cowboy's wages? I can provide what matters most to Amelia. How noble, Stanley sneered. But nobility doesn't pay doctors' bills if her condition worsens. It doesn't ensure she has help when you're out working from dawn till dusk. He gestured around the modest homestead. This is a hard life for anyone. For someone with her challenges, it's cruel to even consider it. Owen stepped forward, his patience wearing thin. State your business, Mercer, then ride out. I've got no time for your games. Stanley straightened, all pretense of civility gone. My business is simple. I want Amelia Rose as my wife, and I'll have her. Step aside now, and I'll ensure you get a fair price for this land so you can start fresh elsewhere. And if I don't, then I'll make certain Judge Rose understands exactly how difficult his daughter's life would be out here. How selfish you are to even suggest it. Stanley's eyes glittered coldly in the lamplight. I can be a powerful friend or a dangerous enemy. Faulkner, choose wisely. Owen's hands clenched into fists at his sides. Amelia isn't property to be negotiated over. She's a woman with her own mind and heart. A woman subject to her father's guidance, Stanley countered. And I'm very good at being persuasive. He turned back toward his horse. Think about my offer. I won't make it again. As Stanley rode off into the darkness, Owen was left with a sense of foreboding. Tomorrow's visit suddenly felt like much more than a courtship milestone. It was a battle for his future with Amelia. The Rose family arrived shortly after noon the next day, their wagon creating a dust cloud visible long before they reached the homestead. Owen had been up since dawn, ensuring everything was perfect. The cabin swept and tidy, fresh wildflowers on the table, and the beginnings of the garden as presentable as possible. As he helped Amelia down from the wagon, her face was alight with excitement. Tell me everything, she urged, her arm linked through his. What does it look like? The land, the house, everything. Owen guided her carefully, describing as they walked. The house sits on a gentle rise, with mountains to the west. The land slopes down to a creek about a quarter-mile away. You can hear it if the wind is right. The cabin is stained dark brown with a stone chimney I built myself. Behind them, Thomas and Eleanor Rose followed with Rebecca, taking in the homestead with appraising eyes. "You've accomplished much in a short time," Thomas acknowledged as they approached the cabin. "Thank you, sir. There's still plenty to do, but it's coming along." Owen opened the cabin door, leading them inside to the simply furnished but clean interior. Eleanor Rose nodded approvingly at the practical layout and well-swept floors. "You keep a tidy home for a bachelor, Mr. Faulkner." "My mother taught me well," Owen replied with a smile, before turning to Amelia. "Would you like to visit the garden now?" Amelia's face lit up. "Yes, please." As they made their way outside, Owen led Amelia to the fenced area near the house. "It's just beginning," he explained, "but I've laid it out with paths of different materials so you can always know where you are by the feel underfoot. This section is gravel," he said as they stepped onto the crunching surface. "I can hear it," Amelia exclaimed, delighted by the sound. "And here, the path changes to packed sand," Owen continued, guiding her forward. "Each section will have different plants. This area will be herbs, rosemary, thyme, sage, things you can touch and smell. And over here," he led her carefully, "will be flowers chosen for fragrance. Roses along this trellis, lavender in this bed." Amelia's face was transformed with wonder as she knelt to touch the small plants, her fingers gentle on the tender leaves. "You've thought of everything." "Not everything," Owen admitted. "I'm still learning. But I wanted to create a place where you could enjoy a garden in your own way." Thomas and Eleanor exchanged glances as they watched their daughter move confidently through the specially designed space, Owen's hand hovering near but not touching her, allowing her independence while ensuring her safety. "Each plant has a story," Owen explained. "The roses are for your name, of course, but also because when we first met, you were wearing rose water, and I've associated that scent with you ever since. The lavender is because you once mentioned it helps you sleep. You remembered that?" Amelia asked, surprised. "I remember everything you tell me," Owen said simply. Rebecca, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "What's this area over here? It looks different." Owen led them to a circular section at the garden's center. "This will be a seating area with a small fountain. Water creates sound that helps with orientation, and the splash will be cooling on hot days." "That's remarkably thoughtful," Eleanor observed. Owen looked directly at Thomas Rose. "Nothing about this garden is an afterthought, sir. Every element is designed to create a space Amelia can enjoy independently and safely, just as everything I do on this homestead is with her comfort and happiness in mind." Thomas nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "I see that now." Amelia reached for Owen's hand, finding it unerringly. "Thank you for this. It's more than I ever imagined." "It's just the beginning," Owen promised. "Each plant, each flower has been chosen to tell part of our story. As they grow, so will the memories they represent." Eleanor wiped a tear from her eye, touched by the young man's devotion. "I believe lunch might be in order. I've packed a basket." As they turned toward the house, a rider approached, Stanley Mercer, looking immaculate despite the dusty ride. Owen felt Amelia's hand tighten on his arm. "Judge Rose." "Mrs. Rose," Stanley called jovially. "What a pleasant surprise. I was just passing by on business and saw your wagon." His gaze fixed momentarily on Owen, a clear message in his eyes. Thomas Rose looked between the two young men, sensing the tension. "Mr. Mercer, you're quite away from town for a casual ride." Stanley dismounted smoothly. "Not at all. I'm surveying land for potential business expansion. But how fortunate to find you all here. Miss Rose," he turned to Amelia. "You look lovely today." Amelia nodded politely, but moved slightly closer to Owen. "Thank you, Mr. Mercer. I don't wish to intrude on your family outing," Stanley continued, though he made no move to leave. "Perhaps I could join you briefly? I'd be interested to see what Mr. Faulkner has accomplished here." Eleanor Rose, sensing her daughter's discomfort, stepped forward. "We were just about to have a private family lunch, Mr. Mercer. Perhaps another time." Stanley's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course, Mrs. Rose. I wouldn't dream of imposing." He turned to Owen. "Faulkner, might I have a quick word about that business matter we discussed last night?" Owen felt Amelia stiffen beside him. Last night? She questioned. Mr. Mercer paid me an unexpected visit. Owen explained, his voice carefully neutral. But anything he has to say can be said in front of everyone. Stanley's eyes narrowed slightly before he recovered his pleasant demeanor. Another time, then. Judge Rose, Mrs. Rose, Miss Rebecca, a pleasure as always. Miss Amelia. He took her free hand and bowed over it. Until we meet again. As Stanley rode away, Thomas Rose turned to Owen with a questioning look. What business do you have with Stanley Mercer? Owen met his gaze steadily. None, sir. He came uninvited to warn me away from Amelia. Amelia gasped. He did what? He believes his wealth makes him the better suitor. Owen continued, holding nothing back. He offered to buy my land if I'd leave the territory. Thomas Rose's expression darkened. That's a serious accusation, young man. It's the truth, sir. I have no reason to lie. Eleanor Rose placed a hand on her husband's arm. Thomas, perhaps we should discuss this after lunch. The food will get cold. The tension remained as they returned to the cabin, but as the meal progressed, Owen's simple hospitality and genuine love for Amelia became increasingly evident. He had fashioned special plates with raised edges to help her eat independently, carved a mug with subtle finger grips, and arranged the table so she could reach everything easily. These weren't grand gestures like Stanley's imported perfumes and promises of servants. They were thoughtful accommodations born of understanding and respect. As they prepared to depart late in the afternoon, Thomas Rose took Owen aside. I owe you an apology, son. I've been so concerned with Amelia's security that I failed to see what truly matters for her happiness. Owen straightened, hope flaring in his chest. Sir, Stanley Mercer could give her financial security, yes. But you've given her something far more valuable, dignity and independence. The older man extended his hand. You have my blessing to ask for her hand when you feel the time is right. Owen grasped his hand firmly. Thank you, sir. You won't regret it. See that I don't. Thomas replied, though his eyes were kind. And Owen, that garden, it's the most thoughtful courting gift I've ever witnessed. It shows a man who truly sees my daughter for who she is, not what she lacks. As the Rose family wagon pulled away, Amelia waved in Owen's general direction, her face radiant with happiness. Owen stood watching until they disappeared from sight, his heart fuller than he'd ever thought possible. What he didn't know was that Stanley Mercer was also watching from a distant ridge, his face twisted with fury. The battle for Amelia Rose was far from over. Fall painted the landscape in russet and gold as Owen worked tirelessly to complete his preparations for winter. The garden, though dormant now, had been carefully prepared for spring, each plant labeled with both written words and raised symbols that Amelia could read with her fingers. Their courtship had progressed steadily through the summer and early fall. Twice more, Amelia had visited the homestead with her family, each time finding new features in the garden. Wind chimes that helped her orient herself, aromatic plants placed at key points as landmarks, and paths designed to be navigated safely without sight. In town, people had begun to speak of their engagement as inevitable. Stanley Mercer had seemingly abandoned his pursuit, turning his attention to business matters instead. Only Owen remained wary, unconvinced that a man like Mercer would admit defeat so easily. On this crisp October morning, Owen rode into Silver Creek for supplies, his mind filled with plans. Winter would be harsh, but by spring, he intended to have a ring and a proposal ready. The garden would bloom just as their life together would begin. As he tied his horse outside the general store, he noticed unusual activity at the Rose household down the street. Several wagons were parked outside, men loading crates and furniture. Concern mounting, Owen redirected his steps toward the Rose home, where he found Rebecca supervising the loading of household items. Rebecca? What's happening? Are you moving? Rebecca turned, her face drawn with stress. Owen, thank goodness. I sent a boy to your homestead hours ago. I left early for town. What's going on? Rebecca glanced around nervously. Father's been appointed to a judgeship in Denver. It happened so suddenly. The previous judge died unexpectedly, and Father received the telegram with the offer yesterday. It's a tremendous opportunity, one he can't refuse. Owen felt his world tilting sideways. Denver? When? We leave tomorrow morning. Rebecca's eyes filled with sympathy. Amelia's been asking for you all day. She's inside. Owen took the porch steps two at a time, knocking briefly before entering the half-emptied house. Amelia sat in the parlor, her face tear-stained. "Owen," she called at the sound of his footsteps. "Is that you?" "It's me," he confirmed, crossing to her and taking her hands in his. "Rebecca just told me." "Denver." Amelia nodded miserably. "Father says it's a great honor. Better pay, more prestige. And there are doctors there who specialize in cases like mine." "Did he consult you before accepting?" "You know how these things work," Amelia said softly. "My opinion wasn't relevant. The family goes where Father's work takes us." Owen knelt before her chair, still holding her hands. "When were you going to tell me?" "I've been trying to reach you since last night." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "Owen, I don't want to go. Everything I care about is here." "You're here. Our garden. I'll follow you." Owen interrupted. "I can sell the homestead. Start over near Denver." Amelia shook her head sadly. "Father forbids it. He says we need time to settle in, that I need to focus on seeing these specialists." "That doesn't make sense. Unless—" Owen paused, realization dawning. "Unless someone influenced his decision." "What do you mean?" Before Owen could answer, Thomas Rose entered the room, his expression grave. "Mr. Faulkner, I thought I might find you here." Owen stood, facing the older man. "Sir, with respect, this sudden move seems unusual, especially the condition that I not follow." Thomas sighed heavily. "It's complicated, son. This position is a significant advancement. The previous judge died in somewhat scandalous circumstances, and the appointment comes with certain expectations of propriety and focus." "Propriety," Owen repeated flatly. "And would Stanley Mercer happen to have connections in Denver? Perhaps friends on the appointment committee?" Thomas's expression confirmed Owen's suspicion before he even spoke. "Mr. Mercer's father does have associates in Denver legal circles. He provided a recommendation. But that doesn't change the facts. This is an excellent opportunity for our family. And the condition that I stay away from Amelia? A temporary measure," Thomas insisted, though he wouldn't meet Owen's eyes. 6 months, perhaps a year, until we're established. You're a young man with prospects here. Surely you understand." "What I understand," Owen said carefully, "is that someone is manipulating this situation, and you're allowing it." Amelia stood, reaching for Owen's arm. "Father, please, don't separate us like this." Thomas Rose looked at his daughter's distress, his resolve visibly wavering. "The appointment comes with a residence. A fine house in a good neighborhood. Amelia, there are advantages I can't provide here. Schools for your sister, social connections, medical care for you." "I don't care about any of that," Amelia insisted. "I care about Owen. About the life we're planning." Eleanor Rose appeared in the doorway, her expression troubled. "Thomas, Mr. Mercer is here to see you." As if conjured by their discussion, Stanley stepped into the room, impeccably dressed in a traveling suit. "Judge Rose." "Ah, and the whole family. How convenient." His eyes landed on Owen with barely disguised triumph. "Faulkner, heard the good news? The judge is moving up in the world." Owen kept his voice level with effort. "Interesting timing." Stanley smiled thinly. "Opportunity waits for no man." "Judge, I've come to confirm our travel arrangements. My father's private rail car will be ready for your family tomorrow morning." "Your father's rail car?" Owen repeated, the pieces falling into place. "How generous." "Only the best for our distinguished new judge," Stanley replied smoothly. "And his family, of course." Amelia's grip on Owen's arm tightened. "Mr. Mercer has been remarkably helpful with the arrangements," she said, her voice tight with understanding. "Almost as if he anticipated Father's appointment before we did." Stanley's smile didn't waver. "Good fortune favors the prepared, Miss Rose." Thomas Rose looked increasingly uncomfortable. "Mr. Mercer, I appreciate the assistance, but perhaps we could discuss details later? This is a difficult moment for my daughter." "Of course." Stanley bowed slightly. "I'll call again this evening. We have much to finalize before tomorrow's departure." As he left, the tension in the room remained palpable. Owen turned to Thomas Rose, his expression determined. "Sir, I respect you greatly, but I need to speak plainly. Stanley Mercer has engineered this situation to separate me from Amelia. His interest in her hasn't diminished. He's simply changed tactics." Thomas rubbed his forehead wearily. "You don't understand the complexities. I understand that you're being manipulated." Owen interrupted. "The Mercers want to control who Amelia marries, and they're using your career ambitions to do it." Eleanor stepped forward. Thomas, I think Owen might be right. This has all happened too quickly, and Stanley's involvement is concerning. Thomas looked between his wife and daughter, conflict evident on his face. What would you have me do? Refuse the appointment? Go back to being a small-town judge with limited means to provide for my family? I'm asking you to see the truth, Owen replied. This isn't about your judgeship. It's about Amelia's future, her happiness. And what can you offer her? Thomas challenged, his frustration breaking through. A hard life on a remote homestead? Winters isolated from town? Limited access to medical care? I can offer her love, respect, and a home designed around her needs, not her limitations. Owen's voice rang with conviction. I've built every part of that homestead with Amelia in mind. The cabin layout, the garden, everything. Not because I pity her, but because I love her exactly as she is. Amelia moved to stand beside Owen, her face resolved despite her tears. Father, I've never asked you for anything. I accepted the fever taking my sight. I learned to live differently. I've been the dutiful daughter. But I'm asking now, don't take me away from the only person who has ever made me feel whole again. The silence that followed was broken by Eleanor's gentle voice. Thomas, remember when we were young? When your father disapproved of me because my family had no standing. You defied him because you knew what we had was real. Thomas closed his eyes, the weight of decision heavy on his shoulders. The appointment can be declined, Eleanor finished softly. There will be other opportunities that don't come with invisible strings. Thomas looked at his daughter and the young man beside her, standing united despite everything. I need to think, he said finally. Owen, I ask that you respect that this is a family decision. Owen nodded reluctantly. I understand, sir. But please, consider what's truly at stake. He turned to Amelia, taking her hands in his. I'll come back tomorrow before you leave. Whatever happens, know that my heart is yours, Amelia Rose. As Owen departed, his mind raced with desperate plans. He couldn't lose her, not like this, not to Stanley Mercer's machinations. There had to be a way. Dawn broke clear and cold over the homestead as Owen loaded the last of his supplies into the wagon. He hadn't slept, spending the night completing his preparations. If Thomas Rose couldn't be persuaded, Owen was prepared for more drastic measures. The small velvet box in his pocket held his mother's ring, a simple gold band with a modest pearl. It wasn't grand, but it represented his heart, his promise. Today, he would ask Amelia to marry him, regardless of her father's decision. If she said yes, he would propose they marry immediately, before the train departed. It was impulsive, perhaps even foolish, but Owen couldn't shake the feeling that if Amelia left for Denver, Stanley Mercer would ensure she never returned. As he drove toward town, the rising sun gilded the autumn landscape. Owen found himself memorizing every detail. The way the light caught the golden grasslands, the distant mountains sharp against the clear sky. This was the land he loved, the place he'd hoped to build a life with Amelia. If she chose to stay with him, he would make sure she never regretted it. Silver Creek was already bustling despite the early hour. At the train station, a private rail car waited, ornate and ostentatious compared to the regular passenger cars. The Mercer family crest was emblazoned on its side, a not-so-subtle reminder of who controlled this journey. Outside the Rose house, the last of the family's belongings were being loaded onto a wagon bound for the station. Owen's heart sank when he saw Stanley directing the workers, already acting as if he were part of the family. Rebecca spotted him first, rushing over with evident relief. Owen, thank goodness. Amelia's inside. She refused to come out until you arrived. Has your father made his decision? Owen asked, securing his horse. Rebecca nodded gravely. He has, but I think you should hear it from him. Inside, the house was nearly empty, footsteps echoing on bare floors. Amelia sat in the parlor, her traveling cloak around her shoulders, her face pale but composed. Owen, she called at the sound of his approach. Is that you? I'm here, he confirmed, crossing to her and taking her hands. They were cold despite the mild morning. Are you all right? No, she answered honestly. But I'm better now that you're here. Her fingers tightened around his. Father wants to speak with you in his study. Owen pressed a kiss to her forehead. Whatever happens, remember that I love you. In the former study, now stripped of books and furnishings save a single desk and chair, Thomas Rose stood looking out the window. He turned as Owen entered, his expression solemn. Mr. Faulkner. Thank you for coming. Sir. Owen stood straight, prepared for whatever decree was coming. I respect that you've made your decision, but before you announce it, I have something to say. Thomas raised an eyebrow, but gestured for him to continue. Owen took a deep breath. I love your daughter, sir. Not despite her blindness, but completely, wholly, as the remarkable woman she is. I've built my home with her in mind, created a garden that speaks to her other senses, and I plan to spend my life ensuring she has both independence and support. He reached into his pocket, withdrawing the small box. This was my mother's. It's not grand, but it's offered with a true heart. I'm asking for Amelia's hand in marriage, today, before you leave. Thomas stared at the modest ring, then at the determined young man before him. You'd marry her today? Without preparation? Without even a proper home ready? The cabin is finished, sir. It's simple but solid. The garden will bloom in spring. We'd start with little, but what we have would be built on love and respect. Owen met the older man's gaze unflinchingly. I believe that's worth more than all the luxury the Mercers can provide. Thomas was silent for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. Well said, son. And as it happens, I agree with you. Owen blinked in surprise. Sir, I spent a sleepless night considering what truly matters for my daughter's happiness. Thomas moved to the desk, picking up an official-looking document. This is a telegram declining the Denver appointment. I sent it first thing this morning. Relief flooded through Owen. Then you're not leaving? We are not. The Mercers' manipulations became clear once I looked past the flattery and promises. Thomas extended his hand to Owen. You were right. This was never about my career. It was about controlling who Amelia marries. Owen grasped his hand firmly. Thank you for seeing the truth, sir. Don't thank me yet, Thomas cautioned. Stanley Mercer is currently at our house, expecting to escort us to the station. He doesn't know of my decision. As if summoned by his name, Stanley's voice echoed from the front of the house, his tone sharp with impatience. Judge Rose, the train leaves in 30 minutes. We must depart now. Thomas met Owen's eyes with unexpected humor. I believe you have a proposal to make, Mr. Faulkner. And I, it seems, have a disappointed benefactor to inform. Owen pocketed the ring box. Sir, with your blessing, I'd like to marry Amelia soon. Not today, perhaps, but Christmas, Thomas suggested. A proper wedding, with time for preparations. And time for you to complete that remarkable garden you're creating. His expression softened. My daughter deserves a beautiful wedding, Owen, and a husband who sees her true worth. Thank you, sir. As Thomas left to confront Stanley, Owen returned to the parlor where Amelia waited anxiously. Your father has declined the Denver position, he said without preamble. You're staying in Silver Creek. Amelia's face transformed with joy. Truly? We're not leaving. Not leaving. Owen confirmed, kneeling before her chair. Which means I can ask you properly now. He took her hands in his. Amelia Rose, from the moment I met you, you filled my world with light. I've built my home with you in mind, created a garden that will tell our love story through every season. Will you marry me this Christmas and make that home complete? Tears spilled down Amelia's cheeks as she nodded. Yes, Owen Faulkner. With all my heart, yes. Owen slipped his mother's ring onto her finger, where it fit as if made for her. It's a pearl, he explained as she explored it with her fingertips. Simple, but genuine. Like my love for you. It's perfect, Amelia whispered, drawing him close for a kiss that promised a lifetime of tomorrows. From the front of the house came the sound of raised voices, Stanley Mercer receiving the news of Thomas Rose's decision. But in the quiet parlor, Owen and Amelia were lost in their own world, planning the future that would begin with the garden's first bloom. Winter descended on the Colorado territory with quiet intensity, blanketing the land in white. Owen worked through the coldest days, expanding the cabin, adding a room that would be Amelia's music space with perfect acoustics for the small piano Thomas Rose had promised as a wedding gift. The garden lay dormant under snow, but Owen continued his plans, ordering special seeds from as far away as San Francisco and New York. Each plant, each flower was chosen for a reason. Lavender for tranquility, roses for love, thyme for courage, sunflowers for adoration. In town, preparations for the Christmas wedding occupied the Rose household. Eleanor and Rebecca sewed Amelia's dress from fine fabric ordered from Denver, incorporating lace from Eleanor's own wedding gown. Thomas Rose, freed from Stanley Mercer's influence, returned to his duties as local judge with renewed appreciation for his position and community. Stanley himself had departed for Denver shortly after the confrontation, his pride wounded, but his ambition undimmed. Few in Silver Creek missed his condescending presence. 2 weeks before Christmas, Owen stood in his expanded cabin, surveying his work with satisfaction. The main room now boasted a larger stone fireplace. The kitchen was equipped with sturdy shelves at heights Amelia could easily reach, and their bedroom featured wide windows that would catch the morning light and fill the room with warmth. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. He opened it to find Thomas Rose on his doorstep, snow dusting his shoulders. "Judge Rose, this is unexpected. May I come in? There's a matter I need to discuss." Owen stepped aside, suddenly apprehensive. "Of course." Thomas entered, looking around with approval at the improvements. "You've been busy. I want everything to be ready for Amelia." Thomas nodded, removing his gloves. "That's partly why I'm here. I received a letter from Denver yesterday. From Stanley Mercer." Owen stiffened. "What does he want?" "To congratulate me," Thomas replied, his tone indicating his skepticism, "and to inform me that he's engaged to a banker's daughter in Denver. Very advantageous match, apparently." That was quick. "Indeed. Which makes me suspicious." Thomas withdrew a folded paper from his coat. "This arrived in the same mail pouch. It's from a colleague in Denver who owes me a favor. I asked him to investigate the circumstances of the judgeship I was offered." Owen waited, tension building. It seems the position was legitimate, but the selection committee was heavily influenced by the Mercer family, and the previous judge didn't die from natural causes as reported. He was encouraged to resign due to improprieties that were about to become public. Thomas looked grim. "Had I accepted, I would have been under the Mercers' control from the start, dependent on their goodwill to maintain my position and reputation. They planned to use you to control Amelia," Owen concluded. "Precisely. Stanley's sudden engagement is likely part of some new scheme." Thomas paced the room, agitated. "I don't trust that he's truly abandoned his interest in my daughter." Owen leaned against the mantel, considering. "The wedding is in 2 weeks. Once Amelia and I are married, his plans won't matter, unless he intends to prevent the wedding." Thomas fixed Owen with a serious look. "I think it would be wise to be vigilant until then." As if to punctuate his warning, the distant sound of approaching horses broke the stillness. Owen moved to the window, tensing when he saw 3 riders approaching through the snow, Stanley Mercer at the lead, flanked by men Owen didn't recognize. "Speak of the devil," he muttered, reaching for his coat. "Stay inside, sir." "I most certainly will not," Thomas replied, already buttoning his own coat. "That young man has some explaining to do." They stepped onto the porch as the riders entered the yard. Stanley, expensively dressed for the cold weather, maintained his customary smug expression. "Faulkner, Judge Rose, what a fortuitous meeting. I'd hoped to find the judge in town, but this saves me a trip." Owen stood tall, his stance protective of his home. "What brings you back to Silver Creek, Mercer? Heard you found a fiancé in Denver." Stanley smiled thinly. "News travels fast. Yes, I've secured an advantageous match, but business brings me here." He gestured to the men beside him. "These gentlemen represent the Western Colorado Rail Company. They're surveying for the new line that will connect Denver to the Western Territories." Thomas frowned. "The rail line is planned to pass south of here, through Marston Creek." "Plans change," Stanley replied smoothly. "The southern route presented unexpected challenges. The northern route, through Silver Creek and directly across this property, has been deemed more suitable." Owen felt a cold that had nothing to do with the winter air. "This is private property. For now," one of the rail men confirmed. "But the company has authority to claim land through eminent domain when necessary for progress. With appropriate compensation, of course." Thomas stepped forward, his judicial authority evident in his bearing. "That requires due process and review. You can't simply declare a property forfeit." Stanley's smile didn't reach his eyes. "The paperwork is being processed. I merely wanted to give Faulkner advance notice. A courtesy, you might say. After all, he'll want time to make arrangements." The implication was clear. Owen would lose the homestead he'd built for Amelia. Their plans, their future, the special garden, all would be destroyed for a rail line that could easily run elsewhere. Owen kept his voice steady with effort. "Your fiancé in Denver. Does she know you're still pursuing another man's betrothed? Stanley's expression hardened momentarily before he recovered. This is business, Faulkner. Nothing personal. The rail line needs to run somewhere. And unfortunately for you, this location has been deemed ideal. By whom? Thomas demanded. The full rail commission? Or just those influenced by your family? The railmen shifted uncomfortably at this accusation. Stanley waved a dismissive hand. The decision has been made. I simply thought you should be informed before public notices are posted in town tomorrow. He turned his horse. Good day, gentlemen. Faulkner, I suggest you start packing. Construction begins after the new year. As they rode away, Owen and Thomas exchanged grim looks. This isn't about the railroad, Owen said. This is his revenge. If he can't have Amelia, he'll destroy what we're building. Thomas nodded slowly. We need to fight this. I have connections in the territorial capital, not as influential as the Mercers, but enough to demand a proper review. That could take months, Owen pointed out. And in the meantime, the wedding will proceed as planned, Thomas said firmly. I won't let that young upstart disrupt my daughter's happiness again. We'll fight this, Owen. Together. As they returned to the cabin to plan their response, Owen couldn't shake the feeling that Stanley Mercer had just played a card that might trump all their efforts. The homestead he'd built for Amelia, the garden he'd designed specifically for her needs, everything was now threatened. But one thing remained certain. In 2 weeks, Amelia would become his wife. Whatever came after, they would face it together. The news of the railroad's plans spread through Silver Creek like wildfire. Opinion divided sharply. Some residents welcomed the economic opportunity a direct rail line would bring, while others objected to the heavy-handed acquisition of property and the disruption to established ranches and farms. Owen and Thomas spent days gathering support, writing letters to officials in the territorial capital, and building a case for review of the route. Meanwhile, wedding preparations continued, with Amelia kept partially shielded from the full extent of the threat to their future home. She knows the railroad is claiming part of the land, Owen explained to Thomas as they worked late one night on their legal strategy. But I haven't told her the proposed route would run directly through the house and garden. She has enough to worry about with the wedding. Thomas nodded understanding. Eleanor's taking the same approach. But Amelia's perceptive, Owen. She knows something significant is happening. Owen sighed, rubbing his tired eyes. I just wanted to give her the perfect start to our life together. Not a legal battle and uncertainty. The perfect start is marrying the man she loves, Thomas replied. Everything else can be rebuilt if necessary. The day before the wedding, Owen worked from dawn until dusk completing the final preparations at the homestead. Though the threat of the railroad hung over everything, he refused to let it diminish the joy of bringing Amelia home as his wife. In the cabin, he arranged everything meticulously, fresh linens on the bed, Amelia's favorite lavender sachets in the drawers, a specially crafted music box on the bedside table. In the dormant garden, he placed markers for where each plant would grow in spring, creating a map of their future together. As twilight approached, he stood in the center of the garden, imagining how it would look in full bloom, with Amelia moving confidently through the paths he'd designed for her, enjoying the fragrances and textures of each carefully chosen plant. The sound of approaching hoofbeats drew him from his reverie. Expecting Thomas with last-minute wedding details, he was surprised to see Rebecca Rose riding into the yard, her expression urgent. Rebecca? What's wrong? She dismounted quickly, breathless from her ride. Owen, you need to come quickly. Stanley Mercer is in town with official-looking documents. Father's arguing with him at the town hall, but it sounds bad. What kind of documents? I don't know exactly. Something about an emergency order for immediate survey work to begin. Rebecca's eyes reflected her worry. And Owen, Amelia, overheard everything. She knows the railroad plans to destroy the homestead. Owen's heart sank. How did she take it? She's upset, of course, but also determined. She sent me to fetch you. She says she has an idea, but she needs you. Owen didn't hesitate. Within minutes, they were riding hard for town, the setting sun casting long shadows across the winter landscape. Whatever Mercer was planning, whatever Amelia had in mind, tomorrow was their wedding day. Nothing would stop that. Not Stanley Mercer, not a railroad, nothing. In Silver Creek, an unusual crowd had gathered outside the town hall despite the cold evening. Inside, voices were raised in heated debate. Owen pushed through to find Thomas Rose facing off against Stanley Mercer and several official-looking men. Papers spread across the meeting table. "This order is irregular, and you know it," Thomas was saying, his judicial authority evident in his bearing. "Survey work doesn't require immediate property access, especially not the day before a documented community event." Stanley affected a regretful expression that didn't reach his eyes. "The Commission's orders are clear, Judge. Preliminary survey stakes must be placed immediately to secure the right-of-way before winter conditions worsen." Owen stepped forward. "And it's just coincidence that this immediate work must happen on my property the day before my wedding?" Stanley turned, his surprise at Owen's appearance quickly masked. "Faulkner, this doesn't concern you directly. These are matters between the Railroad Commission and the territorial government." "It's my land you're claiming," Owen countered. "My home you're threatening to destroy, the day before I bring my bride there. That makes it very much my concern." One of the officials, a middle-aged man with a bureaucrat's cautious demeanor, cleared his throat. "Mr. Faulkner, I understand your frustration, but the Commission has determined this route is necessary for public interest." "Based on what survey?" Thomas demanded. "The original plans marked a southern route. What changed, beyond Mr. Mercer's personal interests?" The official looked uncomfortable. "There were technical considerations. There were bribes," called a voice from the doorway. All heads turned to see Amelia standing there, Rebecca supporting her arm. Despite her blindness, she carried herself with dignity and purpose. "Amelia." Owen moved to her side, taking her arm. "You shouldn't be here. I belong wherever decisions about our future are being made," she replied firmly, before addressing the room. "Gentlemen, I may be blind, but I'm not stupid. Stanley Mercer wants to destroy our home because he couldn't control my father or win my hand." Stanley's face hardened. "Miss Rose, these are complex matters of territorial development that I couldn't possibly understand." Amelia finished, her voice steady. "Because I'm blind? Or because I'm a woman? Either way, you're underestimating me, Mr. Mercer. A dangerous mistake." She moved forward with surprising confidence, Rebecca guiding her to the table. "I've spent my life learning to navigate a world I cannot see. I've become very good at detecting falsehood, at hearing what isn't being said. And right now, this room reeks of corruption and personal vendetta." The railroad official shifted uncomfortably. "Miss Rose, I assure you the Commission's decision was based solely on practical considerations." "Then you won't mind delaying your survey until after our wedding tomorrow," Amelia suggested. "And you certainly won't object to a public review of the decision process, including any financial contributions the Mercer family may have made to Commission members." A ripple of murmurs passed through the gathered townspeople. Stanley's expression darkened. "The schedule is fixed," he insisted. "Survey work begins tomorrow." "No," came a new voice from the crowd. Reverend Collins, Silver Creek's minister, stepped forward. "Tomorrow is Owen and Amelia's wedding day. The entire town has been invited. The celebration will take place at the Faulkner homestead following the ceremony." He fixed Stanley with a stern gaze. "Any attempt to disrupt a wedding day would be seen as a deliberate act of malice, Mr. Mercer. Is that how you wish to be remembered in this community?" Stanley looked around the room, suddenly aware that public opinion was solidifying against him. Even the railroad officials seemed reluctant to proceed in the face of community resistance. "A day's delay changes nothing," Stanley maintained, though with less conviction. "The route has been determined. The Faulkner property will be claimed. Perhaps," Thomas Rose conceded, "but not before a full and public review of the Commission's decision-making process. Not before every alternative route is properly evaluated. And certainly not before my daughter's wedding day." The lead railroad official cleared his throat again. "A short delay seems reasonable. The survey can begin the day after tomorrow, after we've had time to review all the documentation," Thomas insisted, "including the Commission's minutes and financial records." Stanley's face flushed with anger. "This is outrageous. The territorial governor will be very interested in how Commission decisions are being made," Thomas interrupted smoothly, "particularly if there's any suggestion of improper influence." The standoff continued for several tense moments before the railroad official gathered the papers. "We'll postpone the survey pending further review." "But this isn't over, Judge Rose." "No," Thomas agreed. "It's just beginning. But tomorrow belongs to my daughter and her husband-to-be. As the officials filed out, Stanley lingered, his gaze fixed on Amelia with a mixture of fury and something else, perhaps regret. You could have had everything, he said quietly. Amelia turned toward his voice, her expression serene. I already do, Mr. Mercer. That's what you never understood. Outside the town hall, Owen pulled Amelia into his arms, heedless of propriety. That was magnificent, he whispered. Terrifying, but magnificent. She smiled, her face tilted up to his. Did you think I'd let him take our home without a fight? The garden you built for me. Owen pressed his forehead to hers. I love you, Amelia Rose. More than I have words to express. Show me tomorrow, she replied. When I become Amelia Faulkner. Around them, the townspeople dispersed, talking excitedly about the confrontation and the wedding to come. The battle with Stanley Mercer and the railroad wasn't over, but it would wait. Tomorrow belonged to love, to promises, to a garden that would bloom with their future. Christmas Day dawned clear and cold, the winter sun casting a golden glow over the snow-covered landscape. In the small church in Silver Creek, every pew was filled as the community gathered to witness the union of Owen Faulkner and Amelia Rose. Owen stood at the altar, his best suit brushed and pressed, his heart pounding with anticipation. Beside him, his father watched with undisguised pride as the church doors opened and Amelia appeared on her father's arm. She was radiant in ivory silk, her chestnut hair adorned with small white flowers, her unseeing eyes bright with joy. As Thomas guided her slowly down the aisle, Owen felt his throat tighten with emotion. This woman, with her courage and spirit, had transformed his life in ways he could never have imagined. When Thomas placed Amelia's hand in Owen's, the connection between them was palpable, a current of love that seemed to fill the church with warmth despite the winter chill outside. Dearly beloved, Reverend Collins began, his voice carrying to the farthest pew. We are gathered here today in the sight of God and this community to join Owen Faulkner and Amelia Rose in holy matrimony. The ceremony proceeded with traditional solemnity, but when it came time for the vows, Owen had prepared his own words. Amelia, he began, his voice steady despite his emotion, I come to you today with more than promises. I come with a garden waiting to bloom. Each flower, each plant chosen to tell you our story through scent and touch and sound. I vow to be your eyes when you need them, your strength when you falter, but never your limitation. I promise to see you always as I do today, not as a woman who cannot see, but as the woman who sees into my very soul. I give you my heart, my name, my future, whatever it may hold. Tears slipped down Amelia's cheeks as she responded, her voice clear and sure. Owen, you found me in darkness and brought me light. Not by changing my world, but by joining it, by understanding it, by building a place where my blindness isn't a barrier, but simply another way of being. I promise to walk beside you through whatever comes, to fill our home with music and laughter, to tend the garden of our love through all seasons. I give you my heart, my trust, my future, whatever it may bring. When Reverend Collins pronounced them husband and wife, Owen's kiss was a seal on those promises, witnessed by the entire community. As they turned to face their friends and family, the applause was deafening, a clear message of support for the couple whose love had stood against formidable opposition. The celebration moved to the Faulkner homestead, where tables had been set up in the barn, decorated with evergreen boughs and red ribbons. Music, food, and dancing continued well into the evening as the community celebrated not just a marriage but a victory, at least temporarily, over outside interests threatening their way of life. As twilight approached, Owen led Amelia away from the festivities to the snow-covered garden. I want to show you something, he said, guiding her carefully along the cleared path to the garden's center. There, he placed a small stone bench beside the area marked for the future fountain. In the spring, he explained, water will flow here, creating sound to help you navigate. Around us, the garden will bloom in stages, first crocuses and daffodils, then tulips and hyacinths. By summer, the roses will climb the trellis behind us, and lavender will line this path. Amelia's gloved fingers traced the outline of the bench. Tell me more. Help me see it through your eyes. Owen described each section of the garden in detail. The herbs that would release their scent when touched, the grasses that would rustle soothingly in the breeze, the flowers chosen for their fragrance, and the memories they represented. The sunflowers will grow here, he said, leading her to one corner. Because the day we met, you were wearing a yellow ribbon that caught the sun just like they will. And here, Amelia asked, following his guidance to another section. Sweet peas and jasmine. Because the first time I held your hand, you wore a perfume that reminded me of them. For each area, each planned planting, Owen had a story, a moment in their courtship, a memory they shared, a promise for their future. The garden was more than plants and paths. It was their love story written in growing things. It's beautiful, Amelia whispered, tears freezing on her cheeks in the winter air. Even before it blooms, it's the most beautiful thing anyone has ever created for me. Owen wrapped his arms around her, his voice fierce with determination. We'll fight for it, Amelia. Whatever comes with the railroad, with Mercer, we'll face it together. I know we will. She turned in his arms, her face tilted up to his. And even if we lose this exact piece of land, Owen, you've given me something no one can take away, the knowledge that I am loved completely, exactly as I am. Their kiss, witnessed only by the winter stars, sealed that knowledge, a promise more enduring than any garden, any homestead, any plan that might be threatened by outside forces. When they returned to the celebration, it was as partners in the truest sense, united not just by ceremony and law, but by a shared vision of a future they would build together, come what may. Spring, 1872. The battle with the Railroad Commission continued through the winter months, with Thomas Rose leading the legal challenge and the community rallying behind the young couple. Investigation revealed, as suspected, significant financial contributions from the Mercer family to key commission members, casting doubt on the legitimacy of the route change. By early April, when the first green shoots appeared in Owen and Amelia's garden, the territorial governor had ordered a complete review of the commission's decision. The original southern route was reinstated, leaving the Faulkner homestead intact, but requiring Stanley Mercer's own newly acquired property to accommodate a portion of the right-of-way. An irony not lost on anyone in Silver Creek. On this particular morning, Owen guided Amelia carefully along the garden paths where the first crocuses and snowdrops were blooming. In the months since their wedding, she had learned every inch of their home, moving with increasing confidence through the spaces Owen had designed with her needs in mind. The crocuses are purple and white, he described, kneeling with her to let her fingers gently touch the delicate blooms. They're pushing up right where we planted them, along the southern path. Amelia smiled, her face turned toward the spring sunshine, and the snowdrops, like tiny white bells, nodding in the breeze. Their earliest, just as you said they would be. She had taken to gardening with unexpected enthusiasm, her sensitive fingers often more adept at delicate planting work than Owen's larger hands. Together they had spent the late winter planning, ordering additional seeds and bulbs, Amelia memorizing the layout until she could navigate the growing space independently. Soon the daffodils will bloom, she said, rising carefully. Then the tulips. By June, this place will be filled with scent and color. Owen watched her with undisguised adoration. At 21, Amelia had blossomed as a wife and homemaker, her initial uncertainty giving way to competence and joy. She moved through their home with purpose, had learned to cook with increasing skill, and filled the cabin with music from the small piano that had been her father's wedding gift. I've been thinking, Owen said, taking her hand as they walked toward the house, about expanding the garden. Now that the railroad thread is past, we could add an orchard to the north side. Apple and cherry trees. Something for the future. Amelia's smile widened. The future, she repeated softly. Speaking of which, I have news. Owen stopped, turning to face her though she couldn't see his expression. News. Her free hand moved to rest on her stomach, still flat beneath her work dress. Dr. Miller confirmed it yesterday when Mother took me for my checkup. We're going to have a baby, Owen. By winter, there will be 3 of us. Joy exploded through Owen like sunlight breaking through clouds. He lifted Amelia gently, spinning her in a circle as she laughed with delight. A baby, he repeated in wonder, setting her carefully on her feet. Are you feeling well? Do you need anything? Should you be resting? Amelia laughed again, the sound like music in the spring air. I'm perfectly fine. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. most while working far harder than I do. Owen kissed her, pouring all his happiness into the embrace. When they parted, both breathless, he pressed his hand over hers where it rested on her stomach. "A baby," he said again, still marveling at the word. "Now we definitely need that orchard. And perhaps a swing for the oak tree. And a proper nursery added to the cabin. One thing at a time," Amelia advised, though her smile matched his excitement. "The garden first. It needs to be perfect by the time our little one arrives." Together they walked back toward the house, planning and dreaming. Above them, the Colorado sky stretched vast and blue, promising a season of growth and renewal for their garden, their family, their love. Autumn, 1872. The garden had flourished beyond even Owen's most optimistic expectations. Through spring and summer, each carefully chosen plant had bloomed in its turn, daffodils giving way to tulips, then iris and roses, lavender and thyme releasing their fragrance when touched, tall grasses creating soothing whispers in the breeze. Amelia had learned every inch of it, moving confidently along the paths Owen had designed, identifying each plant by scent and texture. The fountain at the center provided both orientation and peaceful sounds that carried throughout the garden. Together they had tended it, expanded it, made it truly theirs. Now, as golden light slanted across the autumn landscape, Amelia sat on the garden bench, her hands resting on her rounded belly. At 8 months pregnant, she moved more carefully these days, but refused to be confined indoors despite the cooling weather. "The baby's active today," she called as Owen approached from the barn where he'd been preparing for winter. "He knows his father's footsteps," Owen replied, settling beside her and placing his hand beside hers to feel the movement within. "Or she," Amelia reminded him with a smile. "We won't know until the day arrives." Owen kissed her temple, breathing in the lavender scent of her hair. "Boy or girl, this child will be loved beyond measure." Around them, the garden prepared for winter dormancy. Many of the flowers had finished their blooming cycle, but Owen had planned for this too, incorporating plants with interesting seed heads that created distinctive sounds in the autumn breeze, late-blooming asters that provided final bursts of fragrance, and ornamental grasses that turned golden in the fall light. "I've been thinking," Amelia said, leaning against his shoulder. "Each plant in this garden tells part of our story. The roses for my name, the lavender for sleep, the thyme for courage during difficult times." "That's right," Owen confirmed. Every choice was deliberate. Amelia's fingers found his, intertwining. "Then we should plant something new in spring to mark our child's arrival. Something that will grow as he or she grows. Something enduring." "A tree," Owen suggested. "An apple or cherry as we discussed." "Perfect." Amelia's face, more beautiful than ever to Owen with its maternal glow, turned toward his voice. "And each year on the baby's birthday, we'll add something new to the garden. A living record of our family's growth." Owen gathered her close, overwhelmed once again by how completely this woman had captured his heart. "I never imagined, when I first saw you at that county social, that we would build all this together. That a blind girl and a simple cowboy could create something so beautiful." Amelia laughed softly. "Not so simple, I think. It takes a special kind of man to look at an empty space and envision a garden designed for senses beyond sight. To see possibility where others see limitation." A comfortable silence fell between them as the afternoon sun bathed the garden in golden light. In the distance, a train whistle sounded, the new railroad line, finally completed along its original southern route, connecting Silver Creek to larger markets and bringing new prosperity to the region. Stanley Mercer had departed permanently for Denver after losing the railroad battle, his pride wounded, but his ambition undimmed. Occasionally news reached them of his business ventures, his society marriage, his political aspirations, a life of wealth and influence that seemed increasingly hollow when contrasted with the authentic happiness Owen and Amelia had found. "We should head inside soon," Owen said, noting the cooling air. "Your father and mother will arrive for supper, and I need to finish the cradle." Amelia nodded, but made no move to rise. "Just a few more minutes. I want to remember this moment, this exact feeling, our garden in autumn light, our child moving within me, your hand in mine. This is happiness, Owen. Complete and perfect." Owen couldn't disagree. Whatever challenges had come, Stanley Mercer's machinations, the railroad threat, the ordinary hardships of building a life in the Western Territories. They had faced them together. And in this moment, in this garden that told their love story through every plant and pathway, they had created something truly extraordinary. Not just a home, not just a family, but a life built on love that saw beyond limitations, that found beauty in difference, that created possibilities where others saw only challenges. "I love you, Amelia Faulkner," Owen whispered, his voice thick with emotion. More with each passing day. Her smile, radiant in the golden light, was all the response he needed. Their garden would sleep through winter. Their child would be born as snow blanketed the land. And come spring, new growth would begin, in the garden, in their family, in the ongoing story of their love. Every flower told that story, and it was still just beginning.